Hey, welcome to Valor and Hope, where we cut through the noise and dig into the facts. I'm Greg, an Iraq war vet committed to progressive change. It's time to stand up, speak out, and take action for the future we deserve. Let's make that happen together. So Trump's announced several nominees for his cabinet. While I won't dive into all of them in the same depth, there are a few I'd like to discuss in more detail than others. I'm also going to include an honorable mentions category here because Matt Gaetz has already withdrawn himself from consideration, but I want to include him. So first, what is a cabinet? Well, a presidential cabinet consists of the heads of federal departments responsible for specific areas such as defense, health, or education. These individuals set policy, oversee massive budgets, and implement the president's vision for the country. Many cabinet members are in the line of succession for president, meaning their readiness for leadership is crucial. For example, Secretary of State is fourth in line to the presidency after the VP, Speaker of the House, and President pro tempore of the Senate. So with that foundation laid, let's take a closer look at his picks. The first nominee I'd like to discuss is Pete Hegseth, who is most known for his job as a Fox News host. Now, I've seen a number of conservatives on TikTok lauding these qualifications, which include graduating from Princeton and Harvard, plus his military experience. For those who don't know, Pete was an Army National Guard major. He deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan and received a couple notable awards during his time in: 2 Bronze Stars, a Combat Infantryman Badge, and 2 Army Commendation Medals. Let's look at his education. Specifically, Pete's degrees are a BA in Politics from Princeton and a Master's of Public Policy from Harvard. While admirable, I don't think those degrees on their own would fully qualify Pete for this position. To explain, let's consider a thought experiment. Your Starbucks barista saves up money and puts herself through both of these programs while continuing to work at Starbucks. Let's say it takes her 10 years to complete them. So now she has 2 degrees, the same 2 degrees that Pete has, plus 10 years experience at Starbucks. Would she be qualified to be the SecDef? I don't think that alone would do it. So here's where Pete's experience comes into play. Again, his primary occupation has been as a host on Fox News, which alone I don't think would qualify. So we have to consider his military experience. I wasn't in the Army, and I was never in the Guard or Reserve, so there's a lot about those worlds that I don't know. I'm going to have to speculate here from the experience that I do know. In my branch, in active duty, a major is the first rank that isn't an automatic promotion. It's the first rank an officer actually has to work for. It's also not usually the highest rank a career officer reaches before retirement. Usually that's a lieutenant colonel or a full bird colonel, at least in my experience. And so Pete's a 20-year major. What does that say to you? When I deployed, the Army personnel I worked with were on year-long tours, so I'll assume Pete spent about 2 years deployed between his time in Iraq and Afghanistan. But that's just an educated guess. Air Force deployments are far shorter, so I'm 99% certain Pete's got more time in Iraq than I did. In other words, while I've experienced being deployed, I spent far less time over there than Pete did. However, comparing our jobs, he was an infantry officer, so he would have had a lower security clearance than I did. I suspect I had a much wider understanding of the area and his intel because of my clearance. I tried to find text of his Bronze Star citations, but I was unable to do so. So I'm not sure what exactly he did to rate those 2 medals. It would have been helpful to know what he did, but we'll just have to imagine. Let's take a step back momentarily now to discuss what the SecDef does. They're responsible for policy development, planning, resource management, and program evaluation. Their office includes top defense decision makers with regard to personnel, weapons acquisitions, research, intelligence, and fiscal policy. The SecDef oversees this department and acts as the principal defense policymaker and advisor. When it comes to Pete's thoughts about managing the military, he's quoted as having said, quote, "Any general that was involved, general, admiral, whatever, that was involved in any of the DEI woke-ish, it's got to go. And either you're in for warfighting, that's it. That's the only litmus test we care about." End quote. As I'll make the case in my next video, DEI isn't the reverse racism boogeyman that Republicans make it out to be. In short, it's meant to recognize that certain systems and processes, like the hiring process, have biases. For example, the hiring process is biased against neurodiverse candidates. DEI is about making sure everyone has equitable opportunities. When it comes to the military, this can include a lot. For example, straight service members and non-straight service members having the same opportunities. When I was in, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in full force, so LGBT service members had to keep their private lives secret. A person's sexuality shouldn't be what determines whether or not they're capable to serve, and that's DEI. I understand Israel is not the best example when it comes to the military. I'm not a genocide supporter, and I don't support our continued alliance with them. But something Israel has done right is their Unit 9900. It's an intel unit whose members are on the autism spectrum, and they use their skills to analyze complex images in real time taken from military satellites worldwide. That's also DEI. So when we're talking about military readiness, it's absolutely worth using DEI to ensure our troops are world class. Remember, we don't all have the same jobs. DEI can help us ensure that qualified people are given a chance and are able to be placed in roles suitable to their skills. So yes, while a main function of the military is, as Pete says, warfighting, wars aren't just fought by the frontline infantry. There are myriad roles all working together without which a war effort would collapse. There are no supplies without logistics. There is no communications without IT. There are no drones without pilots. The military is the sum of all of its parts. So obviously Pete and I aren't on the same page about what the military is, nor would we be on the same page about policies. On its own, I don't think Pete's military service would be enough to qualify him for this position. Remember, as a member of the Guard, he'd only have been active during his deployments and training periods. But I'd argue that this service alone should inherently disqualify him from this position. 10 U.S.C. Section 113 states that the SecDef cannot be appointed within 7 years after relief from active duty as a commissioned officer of a regular component of an armed force in a grade below 07. As a major, Pete's grade is below 07. Currently, this wouldn't apply to him because as a member of the Guard, he wasn't a member of the regular component of the Army. In my opinion, this should extend to all members of the military, not just those that are active. I say this because the SecDef is supposed to be appointed from civilian life. So while Pete's primary job is civilian, he was still a member of the armed forces. I don't see how somebody can be a member of military and a civilian at the same time, unless somebody intends to make an argument that the Guard and Reserve soldiers are always civilians, and if that's the case, they can't be considered military roles. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not making the argument here that 10 U.S.C. 113 as written disqualifies Pete from serving as SecDef. What I am making an argument is that 10 U.S.C. 113 needs to be revised to include Guard and Reservists. So with that argument in mind, in my opinion, his recent service alone should disqualify him. Pete has the honor of being the first nominee in this video to be accused of assault. In 2017, the Monterey Police investigated a report at the Hyatt Regency Hotel involving Hegseth. According to CNN, the victim had visible bruises on the right thigh. Per a redacted copy of the Monterey Police Department incident report, the offense code was PA261A4, which is A, rape is an act of force accomplished under any of the following circumstances, and 4, if a person is at the time unconscious of the nature of the act and this is known to the accused. What does that tell you? The next nominee I'd like to discuss is Mike Huckabee, who's nominated as U.S. Ambassador to Israel. Mike loves Israel. He's been taking trips there for the last 50 years, and he states he feels at home there because of the spirit of the people. He says he's seen the scripture come to life there. After the Hamas October 7th attack, Huckabee visited Israel, stating, "That's when it hit me that we're not dealing with an issue that's political, social, economic, or geographical. We're dealing with an issue that's spiritual. This is evil. The worst level of evil that exists on our planet today, we saw on October 7th. Huckabee opposes a two-state solution and supports further Israeli settlement of the West Bank. In 2017, Huckabee stated there is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There is no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as occupation, and there's really no such thing as a Palestinian. So some Democrats refuse to vote for Harris, stating she's perpetuating a genocide in Gaza. In my state, Michigan, Arab voters in Dearborn went for Trump because of Biden's continued military assistance to Israel. In an opinion piece for Al Jazeera, Ahmad Ibsais writes that they didn't betray the Democratic Party, but that the Democratic Party betrayed them. Regarding the population in Dearborn, Ibsais states that they made it clear that their vote was conditioned on the party pledging its end to financial, political, and military support of the massacres of Palestinians, Lebanese, and Yemenis, but that the Democratic Party didn't listen. Well, with Trump as president and Mike Huckabee as an ambassador, I think we're bound to see some unfortunate developments with regard to Gaza. Let's not forget that Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel back in 2017. So here's a good time for me to be honest about something. In the elections I've been eligible to vote for, I've only been excited about two candidates, Obama and Sanders. I voted for Kerry, Clinton, Biden, and Harris because they were better alternatives to their respective Republican counterparts. In 2016, I almost voted for Jill Stein. I was this close. But I came to the realization that a protest vote wasn't worth a Trump presidency. It's disappointing to me that in 2024, knowing how he was in his first term, people still voted for him or abstained from voting because of Biden and Israel. I agree that the genocide shouldn't be happening or be supported by us. I agree that Palestinians should have their own state, but I myself could not in good conscience throw away my vote to protest. And now with Trump and Huckabee, I wouldn't be surprised if Gaza is turned into a parking lot or beachfront property for rich Israelis. And Mike Huckabee also hosted his talk show Huckabee on Fox, so now he's our second Fox News nominee. Perhaps the most notable nomination is RFK Jr., who's been nominated to be the next Health and Human Services Secretary. Professionally, RFK Jr. was an environmental lawyer. In the 90s, Eliza Cooney was a live-in nanny for RFK's family. She told Vanity Fair that RFK grew up during the late 90s. According to AP, RFK stated on a podcast that he had a rambunctious youth and did not deny the allegation. So this means RFK is our second nominee accused of sexual assault. Since the mid-2000s, he's been an anti-vaxxer. In our modern post-COVID world, I don't think an anti-vaxxer should have a place in the leadership of our Health and Human Services Department. In an interview with NPR, Kennedy said Trump instructed him to return the DHHS to evidence-based science and medicine. Vaccines are evidence-based medicine, and as recently as 2023, he was telling that vaccines cause autism, which is rejected by evidence-based medicine. He also made outlandish claims that COVID was targeting certain ethnic groups, which is not supported by any evidence at all. I should note that RFK has stated on the record that he's not an anti-vaxxer and has never told anybody not to get vaccines, but he also stated on an interview that he told a father not to vaccinate his child because that, quote, might save him, end quote. So read into that what you will. There are conservatives who will say they have a right to bodily autonomy and nobody should force them to take vaccines against their will. Oftentimes, they liken it to abortion and state, my body, my choice. While I generally agree we should have a right to our bodily autonomy, what conservatives fail to understand here is this. Abortions aren't catchy, but infectious diseases like COVID are. If a mother gets an abortion, she isn't going to spread that abortion to people by walking down the street. But if an unvaccinated person gets COVID, they will spread that to people. And as an unvaccinated person, their viral load will be higher, meaning they'd be more contagious than somebody who did get the vaccine. And if somebody caught it from them, it would be a more serious infection. Given how recently we experienced this deadly global pandemic, I think it's incredibly important that our HHS directors understand this and comply logic like that to ensure people are safe. RFK Jr. isn't going to do that. If another deadly pandemic ravages our country, he's not going to force people to take vaccines. The conservatives who claim to love freedom, of course, will support that, but freedom is normally rightfully limited when it infringes upon the rights of another. We can't murder whoever we want. We can't go out and punch someone in the face. We aren't free to drink and drive. These restrictions on some liberties are there so that others aren't harmed by our decisions. Now, I'm going to detour here from the traditional positions for a moment to discuss Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who jointly are the heads of the newly established Department of Government Efficiency. At first glance, to somebody that might sound like a reasonable name, whether you agree with the department's formation or not, but for those familiar with the crypto space, it's a cryptocurrency created as a joke. Since Elon is a fan of Dogecoin, he's almost certainly the originator of this name. To me, this shows how unserious Elon is about this endeavor. He's named this new department after a decade-old joke because he's a child. As a Tesla owner, this is something I'm familiar with. My Smart Summon feature is called ASS, Actual Smart Summon. The Tesla models are S, 3, X, and Y because altogether that spells sexy. I can use a button on my steering wheel to make it sound like my passenger is farting. Now, I'm a child myself. I think that's hilarious. But I don't think an unserious person like this is who we want auditing our government. Speaking of Tesla, in Musk's biography, he's depicted as walking through a Tesla factory at 2:30 a.m., peering underneath a car in the assembly line and stating, quote, "Why do we have 4 bolts there? Who set that specification? Can we do it with 2? Try it." So remember how parts was shown to be flying off the Cybertruck while it was in motion? Did you ever wonder why? That's why. I have no trust that somebody like that would even attempt to sensibly implement reductions. Elon is our third nominee to be accused of sexual misconduct, by the way, from a flight attendant in 2016 who worked on his private jet. In 2018, SpaceX paid her $250,000 in severance in exchange for her not filing a lawsuit over the claim. The first I heard of Vivek was when he declared his candidacy for the Republican Party nomination. He has a BA in biology from Harvard and a JD from Yale. Professionally, he's a biotech entrepreneur who founded Roivant Sciences. His net worth is estimated to be just under $1 billion. Currently, he's got a proposal to cut staffing involving social security numbers. If an employee's social ends in an odd number, they're fired. If it ends with an odd number, they're fired. Thus, only employees whose socials begin and end with an even number would retain employment. According to Vivek, this would result in a 75% reduction. I disagree with his assessment here because that assumes there's equal numbers of employees with each combination of social security numbers, and there's no way that's the case. So the numbers would probably be more random, like 80% or 70% or whatever, but not 75% like he states. But that's not the only problem with this idea. While he's correct it would be a way to reduce bias and eliminations, it provides no way to control for experience and performance. Statistically, it's not going to result in only the least experienced and worst performing employees being kept in their jobs, but it could. If he wants to be serious about this department, he should have experts conduct job analyses to identify if there are redundancies in roles where some might not be necessary. Then, he should have experts implement a performance management system to ensure layoffs are based on objective, fair, and job-related criteria. He could have those experts use organizational diagnostics to identify inefficiencies and redesign workflows for improved productivity. And also, I should note that before 2011, I think it was, your social security number was based on where you were born. So for me, with my 3 from Michigan, I think it means a lot of people from Michigan born around the time I am would all be fired. So you're basically implementing regional firings, I guess. Linda McMahon is his nominee to be the next Secretary of Education. Linda is our 4th nominee with allegations of sexual misconduct. In October, a suit was filed in Maryland alleging that she knowingly enabled the sexual exploitation of children by a WWF employee in the 80s. For those who don't know, Linda is the wife of Vince McMahon. Together, they turned WWE from a small business to what it is today. Linda has a bachelor's in French from East Carolina University. Before joining her husband in Titan Sports, she translated French documents and was a paralegal in the probate department of Covington and Burling. During Trump's first administration, she was the 25th administrator of the Small Business Administration. Now, given her decades of experience in business, I wouldn't really argue against her qualifications for that role, but she has no experience in education other than having been a student herself. In 2009, she pretended to have a bachelor's in education when she was confirmed with the Connecticut State Board of Education. In 2010, she resigned from that role when her lie was uncovered. Interestingly, Linda said her experience as CEO of WWE is what, quote, taught her firsthand the skills Connecticut students need to obtain through education to be successful, end quote. When she campaigned in Connecticut, Linda stated that she supported local control of schools and choice through charter schools. According to the National Education Association, there are 3 top reasons why she is a poor choice for this role. They include, well, first, she isn't qualified. 2, she's pledged to support vouchers, which take resources from public schools and send taxpayer dollars to private schools who are then allowed to discriminate against students and educators. And 3, well, she's a billionaire who rubber stamp whatever Trump wants. Becky Pringle, the president of the National Education Association, issued the following statement about Linda. Every student, no matter where they live, how much their family earns, or the color of their skin, deserves the opportunity, resources, and support they need to grow into their full brilliance. In every community across this country, parents and educators are partners in this effort. By selecting Linda McMahon, Donald Trump is showing that he could not care less about our students' futures. Rather than working to strengthen public schools, expand learning opportunities for students, and support educators, McMahon's only mission is to eliminate the Department of Education and take away taxpayer dollars from public schools where 90% of students and 95% of students with disabilities learn, and give them to unaccountable and discriminatory private schools. Tulsi Gabbard is Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence. In August 2022, Tulsi became a fill-in host for Tucker Carlson's show, which makes her our 3rd Fox News host nominee. Prior to pinch hitting on Fox, Tulsi was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2013 to 2021. She was also, interestingly, the vice chair of the DNC from 2013 to 2016. But I should interject here to add that Tulsi wasn't a real Democrat. And if you think that's hyperbole, get this. From 1988 to 2004, she worked for the anti-gay political action committee called the Alliance for Traditional Marriage and Values. So no Democrat was going to support that. Come on now. From 2002 to 2004, Tulsi was a member of the Hawaii House of Representatives. Around that same time, she joined the Army National Guard, where she still serves as a lieutenant colonel. Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma stated her military background means that she understands the threats as well as anybody. Now, I disagree with her military experience here. She was never in intel. Our intelligence apparatus is massive, and she would be in charge of all of it. Jay Johnson, former Homeland Security Secretary, said of Tulsi that skepticism of intelligence can be a good thing. I think Jay Johnson's take is horrendous because our DNI cannot be somebody that distrusts our or our allies' intelligence. Plus, with her pro-Russia talking points, I'd worry about the potential for leaks to the Kremlin. For those curious about the talking points, I'll bring the article up on screen so you can pause and read it, mainly because this video is going to be long enough already as it is. Next up is Kristi Noem, who's nominated to be the Secretary of Homeland Security. Currently, Kristi is the governor of South Dakota. To me, she's most notable for killing her dog. Kristi stated, quote, "She hated that dog. She was untrainable, dangerous to anyone she came in contact with, and less than worthless as a hunting dog." Kristi claims that this was the moment she decided it was time to shoot her dog. I understand that some people, animals are just animals, but that's not true for me. I don't have kids, but I do have 2 cats. I care about those cats as if they were members of my own family. I could not ever imagine deciding they're bad at being cats and shooting them. Aside from killing her dog, does Kristi have relevant experience that could qualify her for this position? Well, prior to becoming South Dakota's governor, she was in the House of Representatives. Prior to that, she was in her state's House of Representatives. In 2012, she earned a BA in political science from South Dakota State University, and before she entered politics, she worked on her family farm. Well, South Dakota's not a border state, so her current role wouldn't involve border security or immigration. She also has no counterterrorism or law enforcement experience. As governor, she would have some experience with her state's Office of Emergency Management, but is that enough? So let's compare her experience to that of Alejandro Mayorkas, who's the current Secretary of Homeland Security. Alejandro was prior the 6th Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security from 2013 to 2016, and from 2009 to 2013 he was the Director of United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. From 1998 to 2001 he was United States Attorney for the Central District of California. He has a BA from UC Berkeley and a JD from Loyola Law School. So I would say that his experience makes hers pale in comparison. We're getting a downgrade here. Republicans contend Alejandro is doing a poor job in his current role, as is evidenced by Marjorie Taylor Greene's unsuccessful attempt to impeach him, which had 216 votes against and 214 in favor. I should note here, I think, that Biden administration's officials supported a bipartisan border security bill, which Republicans voted to filibuster so Trump could use his claims about the border as campaign speeches. Now, while we're talking about the border, Trump wants Tom Homan as his border czar. Under Trump, Homan was the acting director of U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Agency from 2017 to 2018. Before that, Obama appointed him as ICE's Executive Associate Director of Enforcement and Removal Operations. Early in his career, Homan was a Border Patrol agent, investigator, and supervisor. As border czar, Homan would aid Trump in what they describe as the biggest deportation operation this country has ever seen. Homan states that we can expect shock and awe. I think it's important to note here that undocumented immigrants pay almost $100 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. And with those tax funds, they're paying into programs they can't benefit from, like Social Security and Medicare. In 40 states, undocumented immigrants pay higher state and local taxes than the top 1% of households living within those state borders. In addition, the undocumented immigrant offending rate is lower than that of U.S.-born citizens, according to a study by the National Institute of Justice. ICE Deputy Director Patrick Lechleitner, ICE Deputy Director Patrick Lechleitner claimed 13,099 undocumented immigrants are convicted murderers. Vance claimed Harris let those immigrants into the U.S., but according to factcheck.org, a large majority of those immigrants were in the country before Biden's administration. In other words, they were here during Trump's time as president too. FactCheck also emphasizes that this number includes legal immigrants like green card holders. According to the Cato Institute, some of these convictions date as far back as 40 years or more. The Cato Institute also points out not all these murders were committed in the U.S. Some were convicted of homicide in other countries. The Cato Institute also demonstrates that in 2019, 34,415 individuals were released by ICE. In 2023, that number was 15,514. In other words, under the Trump administration, ICE was releasing more criminals than Biden. And before anyone gets the idea that there's some liberal bias going on here, the Cato Institute is a libertarian think tank. So what this means is that Homan and Trump could cost us $100 billion in tax revenue to deport mostly law-abiding taxpayers. Sure, you could make an argument that being here illegally is a crime, therefore all undocumented immigrants are criminals, and crime should be punished. But we could also make an argument that most Americans are criminals because speeding is a crime, underage drinking is a crime, marijuana is illegal at the federal level. Immigration reform could be done reasonably, but Homan is not the man for that job, and chastising them as criminals is reductive. Susie Wiles, the Trump campaign co-chair, will be his White House chief of staff. She'll be the first woman to hold that position. Many Trump staffers consider her to be a mentor. Staffers also say that she runs a tight and focused ship. During his first administration, there were a lot of shakeups. Perhaps the appointment of Wiles in this role signals his intention to try to keep his team together. Trump wants Stephen Miller as his deputy chief of staff for policy. Miller is perhaps best known as the architect of Trump's Muslim ban. He also recently has been featured in videos from the Heritage Foundation promoting Project 2025, which his activist America First Legal advises. Miller was also Trump's lead speechwriter during his first administration. Along with Trump and Homan, Miller wants to deport up to 1 million people per year. Miller's disdain for immigration goes way back. In 2014, he contributed to the effort to kill comprehensive immigration reform. And prior to Trump, he worked for Jeff Sessions as his chief of communications. Notably, Sessions was one of Trump's earliest supporters in Congress. John Ratcliffe, who was the director of national intelligence at the end of Trump's first term, is his choice to be the director of the CIA. Ratcliffe is a supporter of Israel and a self-professed China hawk. My criticism with him parrots what I said about Mike Huckabee, which is that people abstaining from voting or who voted Trump or third party to protest Biden's stance on Israel, well, this nominee will just make the situation in Gaza worse. Marco Rubio is the nominee for Secretary of State. Since 2011, Rubio has been a United States Senator. From 2000 to 2008, he was a member of the Florida House of Representatives. Prior to his tenure in state and national Congress, Rubio interned for U.S. Representative Leanna Ross-Lehtinen and worked on Bob Dole's '96 presidential campaign. After he finished law school, he was elected as city commissioner for West Miami. In 2016, he ran against Trump, who he called a con artist that couldn't be trusted with nuclear codes. But like many former anti-Trump Republicans, Rubio has since come around to him. Thus far, Trump's nominated many unqualified people for positions of power, and of his nominees, I think I'd say Rubio is perhaps the most qualified for the position he was nominated for. With more than 2 decades in politics, he's experienced and polished. Elise Stefanik is his nominee as United States Ambassador to the United Nations. Currently, Elise is a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, having been elected there in 2014. At the time of her election, she was the youngest woman elected in Congress. Prior to her election in Congress, she assisted with the development of the 2012 Republican platform. In 2009, she worked in the office of White House Chief of Staff Joshua Bolten. Before that, she was a staff member for the Bush administration's U.S. Domestic Policy Council. Along with approximately 170 other members of Congress, she signed an amicus brief to the Supreme Court arguing that Congress did not give the government authority to impose a vaccine mandate. In other words, she opposed federal COVID-19 mandates for private employers. Obviously, I disagree with this position because while we do have many rights in this nation, those rights do not include abstaining from something that will prevent you from harming others in your vicinity. Lee Zeldin is the presumptive nominee to be the administrator of the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Since 2015, he's been a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. Prior to that, he was in the New York State Senate from 2011 to 2014. He's an attorney with a JD from Albany Law School. And since 2003, he's also served in the Army and has earned the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. CNN speculates his top priorities may be to overturn some of the Biden administration's climate rules, such as those reducing pollution at gas producers and power plants, because, of course, the EPA administrator should absolutely allow more pollution to occur, because that makes perfect sense. Time will tell. Sean Duffy is Trump's nominee for Secretary of Transportation. Duffy was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 2011 to 2019. Before that, he was District Attorney of Ashland County from 2002 to 2010. Since 2022, Duffy's been the co-host of Fox's Bottom Line, so he's our 4th Fox News nominee. Now here's where Matt Gaetz is my honorable mention, because he was Trump's choice of a nominee for Attorney General until he withdrew himself from consideration. Gaetz has been investigated by the House Ethics Committee for allegations of sexual misconduct with underage girls. 2 women claim Gaetz paid them for this. One of those women testified with a 17-year-old. Since he withdrew from consideration, I'm going to keep this section much shorter than it would have been if he was the current nominee. But out of all of Trump's nominees, allegations, Gates is by far the most notable and has probably the worst allegations. With Gates out of the picture, Pam Bondi is now Trump's nominee for Attorney General. In 2016, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington discovered that the Trump Foundation gave an illegal $25,000 contribution to a political group that supported Bondi. Since charities aren't allowed to engage in politics, this donation broke the law. At the time, Bondi's office was deciding if legal action should be taken against Trump University. Ultimately, Bondi chose not to take action against them, so his bribe paid off. Bondi has had a close connection to Trump ever since, having been a part of his legal team. In 2019, she served as legal advisor and defense attorney during his first impeachment. Trump stated that for too long, the partisan Department of Justice has been weaponized against him and other Republicans, but not anymore, because Pam will refocus the DOJ to its intended purpose of fighting crime and making America safe again. Of course, this is another lie from Trump. The DOJ has actually been pretty lenient with him. It took Merrick Garland a long time to appoint Jack Smith as special counsel, and now with Trump's election, the DOJ is already looking to wind down the 2 federal criminal cases against him. I should note here that the criminal cases were not a witch hunt, nor was the DOJ being weaponized against him. Trump was credibly accused of breaking the law. Until the Supreme Court decided to make him our king, no one was above the law in this country, but unfortunately now we know that Trump is. Oh, and Bondi hosted Fox's The Five for 3 days, so technically she's our 5th Fox News host. So there you have it, Trump's cabinet picks as they stand today, at least at the time I'm recording this. We're in for a rough ride over the next 4 years, but as long as Trump doesn't use his official immunity to cancel elections in 2026, we only have 2 years before we can hopefully take back the House and/or Senate. While there are dark times ahead, we can't give up. It's our duty to stay informed about what the administration does and to spread the message far and wide. Thanks for watching Valor and Hope. If you found this content valuable, please like, subscribe, and share with others who want to make a difference. Remember, the fight for justice is never over, but together we can keep pushing forward. Stay strong, stay hopeful. I'll see you in the next video.